this is my background that I bring to this talk. So I started with kind of taking mathematics and presenting it in a public science venue in graduate school. And then from then on out, as a postdoc, I started mentoring undergraduate researchers in mathematical biology and also in election forecasting. And we started doing kind of public-facing websites. And then the other kind of thing that happened as I was in these interdisciplinary environments, and then also in my position at Purdue, was I started leading short courses and tutorials in modeling and math biology to different audiences. And so, for example, to an AMS short course that was for pure mathematicians who had never modeled before, or you can think about something like SIAM, where there it's like modelers, we're thinking about other methods in modeling, right? Or EMBL, that's the European Molecular Biology Lab, that was modeling for biologists, right, who have not experienced differential equations before, right? Or NSF-Simons Center, this was also the one that came before this institute. This was more for a biological audience as well in that particular one. All right, and so through kind of going through those short courses and the tutorials, I started to come through what modeling in mathematical biology looked like with me. And so I think in general, these are just, it's interesting to hear what folks do for their courses and things like this. So this is my perspective on it. And I'd be happy to talk more to folks in these breakout rooms about what modeling in math bio look like with you. All right, good. All right, so to put us all in the same talk, kind of perspective for today. All right, today what I'm going to do is just share some of my perspectives, some of my experience. I'm not an expert on this stuff with public science and with incorporating communication into undergraduate research and into classes at the undergraduate and graduate scale. And then because I know there might be some students and postdocs in the audience, I want to also share some kind of very concrete ways for if you'd like to get engaged in practicing communication. Here are some different venues, and I will kind of just flash them up on the screen. But again, I'm happy to talk to people down the line. All right, so the outline will be first, again, because I think it's a wide mathematical audience, I'll talk about some resources in modeling. Again, I'm going to flash them up quickly. There's QR codes that are coming. If you don't catch a link and you're interested in it, you're welcome to email me. I think this is also recorded. Then I want to talk about some of my experience with public science research public science practice in K-12 settings, then undergraduate research, and then this kind of course design. These are the acknowledgements. I want to especially acknowledge Mason Porter. He shared his modeling lecture notes with me when I first designed a modeling class and was terrified. I want to thank Heather Brooks because she is the person who shared many of the resources that I'll show in the next two slides with me. I didn't know about them before her. And I want to thank Michael Reed because when I was a postdoc at the Mathematical Biosciences Institute, we would have these professional development roundtable events with all the postdocs. And Michael Reed would do this kind of practice session where he would point to you and say, explain your research in 2 minutes to a child. Explain your research in 2 minutes to the provost. Explain your research in 2 minutes to a dean. Explain your research in 2 minutes to a pure mathematician who does not want to hire a mathematical biologist, right? Explain your research to an applied mathematician. Explain your research to a mathematical biologist who knows their work really well, right? So this kind of practice and speaking to different audiences. All right, good. So again, like I said, I just wanted to start this off by sharing some resources in modeling because this is where I come from. I specifically wanted to highlight this one by Humphrey, Levy, and Witelski. This is a mini tutorial that was run at the SIAM, Society for Industrial and Applied Mathematics annual meeting in 2016. That link has their slides and also a recording of their presentation. And I thought it was just a really nice way of thinking about how we teach modeling, if we're teaching model building or models in courses at different levels. So I really like this. And then certainly these are also all great resources on modeling that range across different levels. I also wanted to highlight these resources because some of them are recordings. Most of these things, especially on the last page, are publicly available. So this North Carolina State workshop talks more about parameter inference. This is a tutorial lecture that I gave for a biological audience on building models. This was an AMS short course, American Mathematical Society, that Michelle Fung, Heather Brooks, Mason Porter, and I ran virtually. It has a focus on complex social systems. So we do like topological data analysis, network science, modeling, and data ethics in that. And then I also wanted to highlight this article because as I was reading it, I realized that their last paragraph ends with communication and kind of the value of communication. And they specifically point this out in terms of like also thinking about funding and securing funding. Okay, good. So with that, these are the public science and kind of broadly speaking communication venues that I have experience with at different stages in my career. So I'm not going to talk through all these. I'm going to talk through a couple of them, but I did want to put them up here again because this is, I think, a really wonderful community building workshop. So I'm happy to answer questions or, you know, again, if you have other things that you think should be on a list like this so that I can share this resources for other ways of getting involved with folks, I'm happy to hear those ideas. Okay, good. So with that, I'll start with kind of my starting point in public science. I'd say my very first experience with kind of thinking about public science came out of undergraduate. So I was kind of raised in a community where my parents we always had a service component to everything that we did as a child on up. So in undergraduate, there's a time when I used to do painting nails and I taught chair aerobics at a senior citizen center. And then I felt like, but I have this like math background and I wanted to find some way of like, I felt like I should use that like expertise. And so I started being a classroom volunteer in a 3rd grade math class weekly as an undergrad, and that was so much work just to see what the teacher was doing. But really more in grad school was when I started to think about this more seriously. And so it started with this program. So this is the math co-op. It was led and it's still led by Professor Kavita Ramanan. So I was one of the founding graduate student members. And so the math co-op was interested in taking kind of fundamental math concepts, and then Dr. Ramanan would help connect us to local schools in order to go in and give a presentation. And so the other thing that she did was that we had kind of a maybe monthly meeting where all the grad students would come together and you'd like run a practice of your talk, and we'd all try and be children depending on what audience you were looking for, right? And ask questions at that scale. I don't know how successful we were, but this is where I began, and that QR code links to her website. So my concept that I wanted to explain, coming from an applied dynamical systems community, was this concept of equilibrium and stability. And so I did this with a 6th grade class in Providence, Rhode Island, where, right, your stop sign is your equilibrium, and we were thinking about like almost like phase line dynamics, like a first year differential equations class. So this was my first experience. And from then on out, I started getting more interested in kind of taking what I did for research and explaining that to a public science audience. And now in my classes, I really encourage my students to start from what they care about the most and they're most passionate about, because they have the most like expertise and knowledge of that thing, and really like think about it. You know, I mean, I thought about for years how to present this stuff accessibly, right? And I really think that when you start from something you're passionate about, it can give rise to more stuff. So I want to tell you just very briefly about this fish, because this is where my PhD research was, and then I'll lead into the public science that it motivated. So like I said, this is zebrafish. It has stripes on it. It's about the size of your fingernail. We're actually all about 70% zebrafish. We share that many genes with this fish. The critical thing, right, is that cells make up the pattern. It forms as the fish is developing. It forms because those cells are moving around and interacting in the fish skin. You can see them interacting in petri dishes here, right? We have a black cell leading away and a gold cell following it. From a mathematical perspective, it was a question where we wanted to understand what were the cell behaviors that were driving the patterning. And then we also wanted to understand how do cell behaviors change in mutants, right? If you get a spotted zebrafish rather than a striped. Okay, and so these are some of the things that I did as a postdoc, with kind of motivated by that research. So some of this stuff was kind of focused in the school. So Northwestern had this collaboration with a high school where you'd give a research image and then they would create artwork. But the other thing was I really had this interest, like I said, in 1st graders, 2nd graders, 3rd graders, and I had experience working with the Boys and Girls Club and Girls Inc. From high school. So I really wanted to go there, right? These are after school programs largely for under-resourced communities, and design methods that would really be there for those students. And so my kind of personal motivation for really wanting to reach that audience is my mom grew up in a home where the word college was not used, right? And so she had a few K through 12 teachers who made her feel smart at kind of really important stages in her career. And she went on to be the first female electrician in her union, her local union of the International Brotherhood of Electrical Workers in Chicago. So I'm quite proud of her. And my dad grew up in a home where his parents did not graduate middle school. And he had teachers come to his house, public school teachers, and say to his parents, this kid has to go to college. This kid has to go to grad school. They would not have known those words, right? And he went on through IIT and UIC to get a PhD in physics, right? And so I see, like, I'm not, that's not where I am, right? I'm not a K through 12 teacher, but like any sort of opportunity to make a student feel smart, I really see that. And that's my motivation from my parents. Okay, so with that, let me see. These opportunities came from emailing boys and girls clubs. I've done this, I mainly did it in Columbus, but also Illinois. So you just email Boys and Girls Club. I'd say, okay, I'm a researcher at this institution. I have all these craft materials. I'd love to come. It'll be an hour and a half long craft. I'll do a presentation. I'll bring all the resources. Can I come? I can handle 30 students at once, right? And you know, sometimes they respond, sometimes they don't. Sometimes you show up with your boxes of resources, having taken off time for your research, right? And your iron and you're carrying it all. And you get in there and they say, you're not on the schedule. And you go, cool, okay, right? This is like, it's a more hectic environment than I'm used to. That's fine, I'll come back. And then you get into the room, right? And it is, when you're dealing with second graders, right? It's a different environment. We're not like, people are talking when you're talking, right? It's like screaming children everywhere. So it's not always smooth, but I'll show you kind of a walkthrough of the type, like the presentation kind that I would do. And it's gonna be condensed, right? Multiple slides kind of combined. But I would start kind of by entering this Boys and Girls Club, and you know, inevitably the staff member would usually introduce me as Miss Volkening, and I would take that as a moment to correct it, right? Because again, that's part of the reason to be in that space, to say, actually, it's Dr. Volkening or Dr. V, right? Because I went to school for so long. You're not just called doctor if you get a cold, right? And you have a medical doctor. You can also be a doctor because you went to school so long you became the expert at something, right? So to kind of introduce this idea. And so then I'd say, okay, so I work at a college and I teach a subject, and all of your job is going to be to guess at the end of this presentation what I teach, okay? All right, so I really love fish, right? Look at all these fish. What is your favorite fish, right? Oh, well, yeah, Nemo, right? Nemo's got those stripes, right? He's got like those orange and white stripes. And oh, look at this one. Is this like a SpongeBob one, right? And he has stripes too. Oh, but there's this one. That one's kind of boring, right? That one's got like not really any pattern, kind of a plain pattern. It's kind of boring. And so we talk about it, you know, the students tell me what their favorite one was, and I'd say, okay, and I'd inevitably be wearing a striped sweatshirt, and I'd say, okay, but my favorite fish is this one, right? And can anyone guess why? And folks would say, I would say it's called zebrafish. Can you guess why? And folks would say, oh, you know, because of the stripes. I say, yeah, zebrafish has stripes. But what's really crazy is all of these fish are also zebrafish. They're just mutants. That means that they have something different in their genes, and so they're spotted instead of striped. And so what's kind of really cool is if you look at zebrafish closely, you can see their skin is made up of cells. I mean, we're made up of cells too, right? In this case, they have those black stripes and the gold stripes, and they're made up of black and gold cells. Okay, so what we are going to do is a craft today. And how many of y'all have heard of perler beads? Okay, so I would come in and I would have bagged out all the perler beads and then grids. And we did the big grids because these were young kids, right? And I'd say, okay, so your job is all going to be to make a fish pattern, right? And if you haven't seen these, you're welcome to see these afterwards. But the kind of critical thing is that perler beads are tactile, and they are like the cells, right? You can like physically touch the cells. to make the pattern. And your job is going to be to make a pattern, and you make whatever pattern you want. And then I would walk around and be like, oh yeah, what kind of pattern are you creating, right? Oh, it kind of looks like you're following a rule. It's like, you got those spots and they're all the same size that you're creating, right? And we'd walk around, and again, like some students would engage with it, some wouldn't because they're second graders. And then we'd come back together and I'd say, okay, so the really cool thing about zebrafish is not just that their patterns are made of those cells actually make the pattern. It's their job. So cells follow rules of behavior to create the pattern. And I'd show the students videos like these where you can see, say, a black cell leading the way, a gold cell following it, right? It's kind of like they're playing tag, you're it in the skin. And so you can see this process. And so the cells follow rules to create a pattern and make stripes. And so I'd say, okay, so now we're all going to do that. We're going to follow a rule to make a pattern. And so in this case, if you do a single strip of yellow cells across these grid sites that I would color with a different color. So the first rule was just put a line of yellow. And then if you follow the rule, put your finger on a grid site that has a cell and follow the rule, one side different, the rest the same, right? So one side different, the rest the same of those four, you will actually get stripes that are 2 cells wide. Okay, you do need this initial strip first. Okay, and so the students, I would have them do that. I wouldn't tell them what pattern they were going to get, right? And so what I found is students are, children are very smart. So sometimes the adults would have trouble with it, but the children would be figuring it out. We'd have to walk around and some folks would need help, right? And then at the end, I would iron the patterns and they could take it home, right? So then at the end of that, right, you'd stop and say, okay, so can anyone guess what I teach? What do I teach at a college? And you'd have students who guessed veterinary, right, or biology, or science, or art, right, or crafts. And once in a while, I would have a student who would say math, and it's like, yeah, that's right, right? And I would lead them. I'd say, okay, so it's like puzzles and patterns and rules, and like what's puzzles and patterns and rules? It's math, right? And so then the last step was to say, okay, well, this was you were all modeling, right, by hand, but usually I work with many more cells. So then I would pull up my computer and have volunteer students come, and I would show them how we simulate fish patterning with mathematics on the computer. And I'd have students come in and practice that, right? I'd say, okay, can I have a volunteer? You come, and they'd change a couple numbers in the code. I'd show them the MATLAB code, right? It would be in a simplified way, so they just plop the numbers in, and then we'd all hold our breath because it takes a minute for the computer to generate the fish, right? And then we'd see, oh my gosh, so-and-so created spots, right? Oh, this. And so that was kind of where we went with that. All right, so then again, what was my goal in that process? It wasn't to like explain zebrafish to kids. It wasn't to have them remember this rule. I think that different children are going to get different things out of that. Some students are going to get, this person came and she came from a college, I don't know, and she talked, right? That's might be all they get. Some students will get she talked about math and fish, and they were somehow was connected, right? Some students will take this home and show it to a friend or family member, and that will increase the impact of the work. But really my major goal was to put students in a place where I feel like when they're doing this, they are being the mathematician, right? They're putting on their mathematician hat, they're putting on their modeling hat. And I wanted to put students in a place where they felt confident and smart in a mathematical space. And again, with 30 screaming children, you're not going to reach, I personally could not reach all of them. It was a matter of reaching, if I could make 1 or 2 children feel smart who are engaging with that, then I felt success. Okay, so that was all fine, but there are issues with that. So one issue is perler beads are expensive. Another issue is it required me in the room, right? Because this last bit where we do the computer simulation, which kind of ties it all together, MATLAB has a paywall. You got to have it on your computer. You got to have someone who can run the code. And so I got interested in asking, how would we build on this to make it something where folks could use kind of without a researcher being in the classroom? And this is where I started to also think about how can I incorporate students into that process. And so this was work with a post-bac student like Sherman, who was at Northwestern at the time, and then he went on to a master's degree at DePaul, and now he's gone on to a PhD program where he was a pure math student. He wanted to learn some computer programming, and so I told him, let's create kind of a website, and he coded up the JavaScript behind the website where it would create a simple model that runs that rule, where you could pick different initial conditions, right? You can have like all sides the same, one side different, the rest the same, random, right? And it'll generate different types of patterns. And then we talked, heavily about how do we kind of present this and what language do we use for this. And then along with that, there was a craft that we created, right? That could be cut out so that you don't need the perler beads. And then the other piece of this was to write an article co-authored with Blake for Frontiers for Young Minds. And then later on, I also wrote an article for The Conversation. All right, how many of y'all have heard of Frontiers for Young Minds? Okay, how many have heard of The Conversation? Okay, these are really lovely venues. So Frontiers for Young Minds is a journal that it has no paywall. It is freely available to publish in. It is articles written for children, usually 10 to 12 years old or 12 to 16 years old. They are edited by children with a mentor, right? There's some science mentor. I'd say in general, a lot of the Frontiers for Young Minds articles are written from like a biology or kind of science perspective. So I think we need more math Frontiers for Young Minds articles. What else? I'd say they can be one of two things. They can be a core concept or an explainer article. So or a core concept or I'm forgetting the name of the other one, but basically core concept is where you're taking something that is like fundamental to your field. So for me, I wanted to say like, how do mathematicians and biologists work together, right? And use zebrafish as a way of motivating that. The other type is suppose you've written a publication on your research and you just want to explain that to a child, right? So that's an article that's very focused on your paper and it cites your paper up above. And then you're kind of highlighting that to a child. They're about 1,000 words. It's total fun. They have artists that work with you to create imagery that's like child-friendly in these things. And then for the early career folks, I will say, this actually counts as a publication in your work. And the other thing is, so we wrote a paper like this, and I didn't know if it would actually kind of related to your question. Like, I guess supposedly high schoolers use this, supposedly teachers use this, I don't know. I was surprised because I had international folks in journalism reaching out to me to be on panels because they read this paper and it was like they were journalists in different countries. And so it has a visibility that I did not expect. So there is value in kind of, it reaches an audience. So I'll show some of the articles that I have really enjoyed in this setting. So the very first one I saw was by Peter Holm, Mason Porter, and Hiroki Sayama. They wrote an article explaining network science to kids using Frozen, the movie. So it was like, who's the most important character in Frozen as a network? Total fun. Then let's see, Michelle Fung et al. Wrote a paper explaining persistent homology, topological data analysis. This was for the 14 to 16-year-old age group, and they used Pokemon and studied the shape of Pokemon. It's just a total fun read. It's the paper that I give students when they're interested in applied TDA at any level, undergrad or grad, because it's a great starting point. Let's see. This was the one that Blake and I wrote. So, right, who's a post-bac student, where we wanted to just put students in the frame of math and biology work together and really put them in the, they're the mathematician, their math hat is on. And then there's another one written by Heather Brooks et al. Looking at susceptible disease transmission models, right? So these are, I think, total fun papers. Okay, I don't think there was anything else I wanted to say about that. Okay, good. Any questions on that? Yes.
Just a remark. I just feel it's super cool that the reviewers are young people.
Yeah, it is, and they really they give you feedback that you wouldn't think about. The other thing about all these articles is, like I said, there are 1,000 words, and you can have a glossary as part of the article, but the glossary can only have 6 words in it. So I think that's like a really super challenge to think about, like if you are explaining some concept in research to children, what are like the 6 words that you would use that are like not in normal, like everyday communication? And so like for us, we used, I think, mathematical model, simulate, gene, mutant, maybe applied mathematician, I forget what else. Yeah, okay. Yeah, but it's a total fun thing. And it's also total fun to see the pictures that the artists come up with. I think it's like so this paper for me was like a passion project over years to come up with that story. All right, so the other thing, the conversation, I'm highlighting this again because I know there are some postdocs in the room. This is something that is only appropriate at an undergraduate audience or a graduate audience if you have a faculty member writing with you. So the conversation, you can sign up to have a kind of an account on the conversation. And what this is like 800 to 1,000 words articles. And I think of these as this is like adult public science. It's really like the articles that we would all want to read, our families would all want to read while they drink their coffee in the morning. It's got to be kind of like interesting, short. The process of writing for the conversation is that you pitch an idea to an editor. So you write like a short paragraph about your idea. They ask you things like, what are you going to write about? Why is it widely of interest? And why now, right? So I have pitched ideas that got accepted and pitched ideas that got rejected. So, it happens. Let's see. And so I would not get discouraged if your first one doesn't. And then what else? So like people write these things about, for example, Thomas Rowley has written tons of the conversation articles. And things can be like, for example, Alan Turing's birthday. Folks will often write a conversation piece on Alan Turing's birthday. So this was more kind of research at the adult scale. Okay, so I did want to highlight some other examples from other folks, kind of research-centered engagement. How many folks have heard of visual PDE? Okay, so visual PDE is, I think, total fun. So Andrew Krause is the person that I know who's associated with this. It's cool from a research perspective. It's like this website that allows you to like simulate your PDEs. It's also really lovely for, I don't know about y'all, but I'm like a very nervous flyer. So you can go up on this website and it'll give you like fluid flow equations and you can click on the simulation and it'll like do a drop in the water and then you can see the drop pattern moving in time on your computer. Is like peaceful. So I think there's all sorts of uses to this, but it's also got, for example, you can put like Alan Turing's face on it and it'll do like pattern information on a reaction to fusion equation from Alan Turing's face. They have other mathematicians and scientists as well. And they're really, so I said, there's a research arm, but there's also a public science arm where it really makes PDEs accessible to folks. Complexity Explorables is another really kind of cool thing where there's all sorts of kind of website places where folks can engage with this stuff. All right, good. I also wanted to highlight these. So this is, again, Thomas Rowley is one of the folks that I think is just like really remarkable at public science. If you link to his website, he's got all sorts of YouTube videos. And then Orit Peleg is another one of those folks that I just look up to in her public science. She's engaged folks in viewing, like folks all over the country in collecting data on fireflies. And so it's, again, just, I think, really engaging research-centered public science. Okay, so with that, like I said, I had started to move into thinking about incorporating undergraduate students into writing public science articles and designing websites that could like present the research accessibly. And then the other component was just that I like to mentor undergraduate research teams. And I'm really kind of interested in just generally, I think that we're often kind of very discipline siloed. And I think especially at the undergraduate stage, you don't necessarily have the opportunity to like talk across disciplines in like a real kind of hands-on way. So this is what I wanted to do. And so one direction of this is centered on election forecasting. So I had some initial papers on election forecasting. Our work on election forecasting, just very general, is differential equation models plus polling data, tracking Republican, undecided, and Democratic individuals at the swing state level across the country, right? So we do fully transparent, all our code is publicly available. And then we also, so we publish on that for methods, but then we also have a public facing arm that is our real-time forecasts. And so I've had students do election forecasts with real-time websites in 2020, which was, I'd say, hella brave of those students because we were all virtual, and it's stressful to put your kind of forecasts up I mean, stressful for many reasons, but it was stressful. I've done it in 2022 with a Purdue team, and this is the 2024 team at Purdue. So Joe, Alexia, and then Maya. And so, like I said, one component is that the students build a website where they regularly post their forecasts every couple of days. I also really am very careful about how I build interdisciplinary teams of undergraduate students. So I interview students, and then I try and pick students who have complementary expertise with one another. I call it the election team. The students are quite proud of being on the election team. And so I start meetings off right by creating the sense of like, we are a team community. And, then Maya is the computer science expert. She's the person who you go to if you have Python questions, right? And Joe has our biostatistics expertise, and Alexia is taking differential equations, right? So like each person has their expertise, and they have this community, and they all have a Slack channel that they chat on. And then the other component, right, is I would really love someday to have a journalism student on this team. I think that would be super, to have a math student talking to a journalism student talking to a math, like that. That would be fun. I haven't gotten there yet, right? But for these students, what I do is I kind of actively go out and try and find ways for them to get publicity, because I think that publicity spreads the impact of the work, and it helps the students be very proud. So like I always, whether it's election forecasting or something else, will connect to the Office of Undergraduate Research at Purdue and just like say, hey, my students, right? Maybe they could be like on your Instagram account, like, ah. And so these are Instagram videos that these students presented, right? They take that home, they can show it to their friends, they can show it to their family. It spreads the kind of value and the pride in their math. What else? We try and think creatively about the website. So our 2024 website had information on how to register to vote, right? So that's something that Dan Maya spearheaded. We're also thinking about putting links to research on how viewing polls and forecasts can also impact your choices to vote. So we want to kind of be very transparent in this. And then the other thing I did was contact the Purdue newspaper so that they could have a weekly column where it's like the Purdue election team's forecasts. And again, the students are quite proud because their names are on that, right? They're the CRUD, we're the Compartmental Republican Undecided Democratic Team. This did not work the first time I reached out. The first time I reached out, the Purdue newspaper did not respond. Right, in 2022, I emailed again in 2024, like, hey, we should have this. And then they said, yes, from then on out, they'll do it, right? So just to kind of like bang on those doors. Okay, good. So let me see. So the other thing that we do, right, I said we talk about how to kind of present research accessibly on our website. So for the election forecasting work, this is work that it kind of came out of, the model is at its core a compartmental model, and it's kind of inspired by infected susceptible models, but with two diseases spreading. So as you can imagine, using the word disease transmission and election forecasting in the same sentence, right? You gotta be real careful about that, right? Especially when you have undergraduate students talking on podcasts, right? You gotta run a tight ship and explicitly talk about like what things we can say and what things we have to be careful about, and like how we have to be aware of the limitations of our model and the simplifications, and how what questions I take, right, on how we respect one another. So we do very kind of directly talk about those things. But for example, in 2024, Alexia, Joe, and Van Maya did a podcast recording with the Purdue Superheroes of Science, right, where we all talked. And again, I was really proud of these students because they talked about, this concept of like, when is a forecaster wrong, right? And are our models right? And they engaged with those questions in ways that were like aware of the weaknesses and the simplifications in the models. Okay, but like I said, we do like explicitly train for that, and we practice beforehand. The other thing I do is I just really try to encourage creativity in this type of stuff. I think that public science is an opportunity to be very creative with the undergraduate students. And so like things like we have a stochastic model. So in 2020, we wanted to highlight kind of the uncertainty in election forecasts. So these are different outputs of our stochastic model in 2022. This was led by Ryan Brandstetter. We created this kind of spin the wheel kind of structure where you spin it, trying to be interactive and explain probability is a hard concept, right? And uncertainty for public audiences. I mean, just in general, I think, when we're viewing election forecasts. For Joe and Thanmaya here, so each year, right, we present research. There is an opportunity in 2025 for the students, instead of presenting a poster at Purdue, to present like a hands-on activity. And so we really like brainstorm and like go home and think about how could you explain what you're doing, and think about, right, what is you're most passionate about. I said to the students, you've been working on this project for a year. What is the thing that you're graduating this year. What is the thing that you want to share? And they all came up with their thing that they really cared about. And so one of the things they did was we had these thermostats, right? We run 10,000 simulated elections in order to make a forecast. We just picked 100 of them. And so you'd go up to them and say, okay, they'd ask you, so we run 100 election outcomes for to predict who's going to be the president. So pick between 1 and 100, and we'll share that election outcome with you, right? So someone picks 67 or 53, and we pull up that election outcome, right? And so Thanmaya would have it on her computer. Or Joe was very interested in the research side, where we're looking at grading different pollsters, kind of similar to what 538 and Nate Silver do, but in a fully transparent way. So he came up with this idea of having cups that represent different pollsters, right? And he had the identities on it, and there were like 10 different pennies, and he'd give you the 10 pennies, and you had to put the pennies in the cups, deciding like which pollsters you would weight. And then he'd say, well, how would this depend on what if this pollster was good this year, but like it was bad that year, right? And this one was consistently good except for 1 year before, right? And how does that impact your choices? And then he had on his computer, he would quick choose the numbers that you picked, how you weighted them, and tell you what your forecast in Indiana would have been based on that weighting. So it was his very kind of active, and again, since we're proud of it. The other kind of thing we incorporated in our 2024 approach was that we wanted to talk about kind of conditional probability. So this is our kind of chance of a Harris or Trump win. This was this was like a snapshot of maybe an October forecast. I don't remember. But you can see this. And I think that when viewing forecasts, a lot of times there's a mix up between like margin and chances, right? Because I even talked to like colleagues who were like, oh, you're giving Trump a 55% chance, so you think Trump's going to win. And it's like, no, that's a freaking half and half. Like that's, I mean, if we all had like if there was going to 55% chance of rain and it didn't rain, like that wouldn't be shocking, right? So what we had here was this idea where you could click on a swing state, and it would do a conditional probability on if we only consider the simulated elections where, say, Pennsylvania went blue, how would that change the chances, or Georgia went red. And so the students coded this up, but then the other thing I really tasked them with was creating a name for it, right? And we thought about like, how can we engage with Purdue's logo on it, things like this. But I wanted a name for it because we don't want just this to be like conditional probability of election forecast. Like that's quite boring, right? And they would go back and I say, think creatively. Like, think about it in the shower. Like this is when you think about it, like just while you're walking around, and then come back to me and give me ideas. And I was like, and then Thanmaya came up with Swing the States, which is total fun, right? So again, it's just like a way of encouraging that creativity. I like to do that. All right, so the other thing I'll say about the election forecasts, like I said, when I had the students getting interviewed on the Instagram short videos or on podcasts or on the website, I did train them in how to talk about like this kind of serious topic in a way that recognized the simplifications in our model and the uncertainty in our predictions and the value of what other folks have done. And it is an example of timely public science. I'd say it's timely public science that is not nearly as you think about like the stuff that was going on during the COVID pandemic when people were thinking about disease transmission. That's another level of seriousness. But I did want to highlight these as other examples of things that folks have done. Matthew Kay created this like presidential Plinko website that is another way of describing uncertainty. And then Ian Griffiths et al. This is one of their approaches to kind of explaining disease dynamics. And then coming from the other perspective, this is something that I was involved in as a postdoc at Northwestern. Patty Wolter is a journalism instructor there at Medill, and she had this really super thing that in her science journalism classes, she would reach out to graduate students and postdocs in math and science and invite them to come to her classroom and give like a 3-minute blurb, 5-minute blurb on their research. And then her journalism students would write up articles. And so I pulled this quote on the undergraduate research. So it can go like both ways. And so again, this is like, I would love to connect more with the journalism side in this stuff. All right, so that's undergraduate research. And then the last kind of bit that I want to talk about, and I'm okay on time-ish. Okay, all right, so the last thing I want to talk about is thinking about, so again, public science is kind of one perspective on communication, but I think that for mathematical modeling, if a student wants to go and then be in a career where they're talking about their math to stakeholders, or if in a graduate they want to go on to a PhD and then maybe to academia, in that setting, right, they need to be able to talk about their impact of their work to funders, right? They need to be able to give very broad like job talks, right? All these different things. So I think that there's value in presenting accessibly just in general. And so this is one of the classes that these are both special topics classes at Purdue. So this was mathematical modeling. I've taught it one time. It was fall 2024. I meant it for it to be to an undergraduate class, focus on like the mathematical contest and modeling preparation. It ended up being predominantly PhD students, but there were, I'd say 30% undergraduate students in it. And so again, this is what the kind of rough schedule looked like. Some of the topics we did based on class interest related to your point, we did image processing because the students were interested in asking like hands-on, how do you extract information from qualitative data. The other thing we did is I had a panel of like national lab and different types of career, and someone from Spotify, right, and pharmaceuticals come and talk to them about like job opportunities. So this is, like I said, what modeling looks like for me, because again, I'm really happy to hear from other folks about what these types of courses look like for you. So we did 5 homeworks, and several of them had a communication element. I like kind of pick your own adventure style homeworks for a class like this because I want the student to get out what they want from the class. So most homeworks had multiple options. The first is a communication homework. So this is a setting where all those different resources that I highlighted earlier, things like the conversation, things like Frontiers for Young Minds, things like blogs that SciAm runs, this is cut off. There's other examples. I would say to the students, all right, your first assignment is modeling requires speaking across disciplines. So I'm going to ask you to write a public science article, right? And it's hard to write short, so I want it to be under 1,000 words. And your goal is to take something from this class or another class, or maybe an undergraduate class that you are passionate about, and explain that concept. So this class had engineers in it as well, and also a few biologists. So it ran the gamut. I had an undergraduate student who explained coordinate systems to a public science audience, right? What were like XY coordinates? What was polar coordinates? Why were they important? I had someone explain how kind of batteries work. Somebody picked, what else did folks pick? Someone wanted to pick like the idea of like chaos and like how butterfly kind of dynamic. So it ran the gamut, but I really encourage folks to come talk to me and think of an idea that they were passionate about and then explain it. And then I did provide detailed feedback on their writing because I think, at least for me, right, that was not something that I had in classes as an undergrad or grad student, like feedback on writing. And I also, it's flexible depending on what the student wants to get out of it. I encourage them to write it for a public science audience, but if what they really wanted was to prepare something that would present their research to a different discipline, they could do that, but they needed to tell me who the audience was, and then I would give them feedback on if it was appropriate to the audience, right? We encourage the use of metaphors if explaining to children, and this concept of like how many words are you using that are not outside of kind of general use. So that was homework 1. This was later on homework 2. So this stuff you don't have to read. The whole point is just, it was a modeling question. I wanted them to kind of grapple with this building a model to an open-ended question. And as part of that, I think that, again, one of the skills that I did not learn until kind of a research setting was how to create like an image or a schematic that could explain a concept to an audience. So I asked students to create a image explaining their model, which again, they could have feedback on and how to do that in kind of a publication ready way, especially for the PhD students, and gave them resources on how to do that with free software. Okay, so that was a different type of maybe research communication. And then the last bit for this class was the final bit of the class is on applied topological data analysis. So again, there were various choices depending on their interest. If they cared more about PDEs, right, they could intersect with that visual PDE or simulate a PDE on their own computers. But there was a public science option inspired by Michelle Fung et al.'s work, where I said another option is to go take an image from like, something that excites you in the community, and then image process it, extract the point cloud pattern, right? Compute persistent homology, and then give me a public science paragraph explaining the shape of that image, right? So again, they could choose to have this communication experience if they wanted to. And I would always give resources on that and examples. All right, for math biology, I have run this twice at Purdue in spring 2023, and then again currently. This is again a special topics course. It's 500 level. It has, the first time I taught it, it was kind of half math, half engineers, and a little bit of bio. This time it's kind of been like a hunk of mathematicians, so predominantly math. There is, I'd say 20% undergrad, and then the rest PhDs. Well, 20% undergrad, maybe 10% masters, and then the rest PhD. So again, communication is part of the kind of description of the course. And I start a course like this by everybody has a name tag, right? I encourage everyone to learn the names of the rest of their the class, right? We get a sense of who's in different disciplines, who has experience with industry, right? I tell the students explicitly that if someone asks a question that you think is like obvious, that is a function of the fact that we have a very interdisciplinary community in this class, just like mathematical biology research. And so if they ask some question that you're like, holy smokes, that's so obvious, then you think, whoa, that's a person who has complementary expertise to mine. That's someone I should work with on the team project, right? Because they know something else that I don't know. So we kind of explicitly structure it that way. So for math bio, the first homework here is I've done different flavors, but the key thing is I want them to take and read a paper outside of their field. So for math students, that means I want them to read not a math bio paper, but a bio paper. And I help them find that. And if you've ever read a biology paper as a mathematician, like the amount of vocabulary words, and you're like, what even is that thing? What is CH421? Is that like a person? Is that a protein? Is that a gene? Is that like a cell? Is it like a part of an organ, right? Like, what is the thing? What does it do? And so, well, we do that too as mathematicians, right? So the goal is that they have to take that paper, read it, and I've done different veins of this. Closer to the pandemic, I wanted them to present it in a 5-minute recording that they posted on YouTube, because I had to make videos for like job interviews on the pandemic. So I wanted them to like be comfortable with that and be comfortable with recording themselves. Later on, I've had them do it more like a paragraph, because I'm trying to give them feedback on how you would referee a paper and how you do that in kind of a respectful way and like do a summary at the start of refereeing. But this is the whole goal here, is to like get outside of your comfort zone, be confronted with the confusion, feel the confusion of crossing a disciplinary boundary, get like hit in the face with it. And then the next step is that we go back to the communication homework. One is writing a public science article now, where you take something that you care about and explain it to a wider audience. All right, so with that, thank you all, and I'm delighted to take any questions or comments.
About 5 minutes for questions before we go to break.
Can you give a little background into your own history and how your own research has kind of led to this, like how you feel the importance of communication across like interdisciplinary? Like, did you start as a math undergrad and then you went to PhD for applied math? Like, did you know math bio? Because it's a relatively new field.
Yeah. So it's a good question. So I started math in undergrad, but I was undecided when I went in. So I actually took very few math classes as an undergrad, but I was math. I did an undergrad research experience. I learned that math bio was a thing. John Zweck told me that medical doctors need mathematicians, and I was like, what? Right. So that was cool. So I only heard about that in undergrad. Grad school, applied math at Brown, I'd say, was more the theoretical side of applied math. So I wasn't taking math bio courses, right? We didn't have modeling or math bio courses at the time. And then I went to the Mathematical Biosciences Institute, which was really kind of, at the time, it was led by math folks. And then I went to the NSF-Simons Center for Quantitative Biology at Northwestern, that at the time was led by a molecular biologist. So it was different culture. So I think that that's the other thing to get across, is just like teaching students awareness of culture differences in different fields, because that can sometimes be part of the challenge. And I knew I always wanted to be in a math department. So yeah, I don't know if that answers your question. Yeah. But yeah.
So thank you for a wonderful talk. I'm in a biology department. I teach biology, and a common narrative that I hear a lot from our students is, oh, I've always loved STEM, I love science, but I don't like math, so I chose biology, right? And I'm working to try to combat that sort of math phobia.
Yeah.
And I wonder if you could speak to a little bit of sort of how you might sort of, as a biologist or pure biologist or as a pure mathematician, how can we kind of bridge that gap for the students that where they may not see the benefit of math or might be afraid of some of the math that we're asking them to do?
Yeah, I mean, I think that's like that's just a huge problem, right? And I think these are the things that, like I said, I'm not an expert on any of these things. They're just things I've thought about. So my personal opinion currently is that I think that modeling should be led with earlier, because like I said, I was teaching modeling to second graders. I think you can teach a certain component of modeling at any scale. And for many students, calculus is not necessarily what they need, but like this concept of like seeing how math is connected with different fields could be at an earlier stage. So partly that. I think that the other thing though is like there's always this interest in saying like, okay, let's expose the biologists to math. I think that related to the NITMB's call and like what Julie was saying about the Simons Foundation, I think the other thing that needs to change is this idea that like we could instill our math students with an appreciation for, if you think from a biological lens, how that can lead to new mathematical questions. So I think that could be part of grad classes or even undergrad classes in a different way. And maybe it's partly what I'm saying about like giving undergraduate students an opportunity to feel expertise and feel like an interdisciplinary team. Yeah, so that's some ideas.
Thank you.
Okay. But I'd be happy to talk more and hear your ideas.
Good question. When it comes to like okay, well, thank you. When it comes to I want to say the undergrads and I guess graduate students you've did research with, have you come across nuclear researchers, nuclear physicists?
Nuclear researchers or nuclear physicists?
Yeah, because some of this seems like it ties into the chemical structures of stars and stuff. I was just wondering.
I mean, I usually have mentored math major students who are interested in like in election forecasting, political science, and math. A lot of like electrical engineering and computer engineering students come through. Yeah, I don't know if I haven't done nuclear engineering yet.